Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. I now call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, we have regrets from Councillor Hutchins. Council, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none. Could we have a mover and seconder to resolve in a committee of the whole? Councillor Lapworth and Councillor Duddick, all in favour? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Council, you have 4 consent items, public consent items 1 and 2, and confidential consent items C1 and C2. Is there a mover for the consent items? Councillor Adams?
There, I'm back. I'd move them, but I'd like to discuss item 1 before we move it. I have in front of council a amended item 1 for consideration.
No problem. Councillor Elger, which did you want to separate?
It's the same one, item number 1.
Okay. Then can I call the vote on the balance? All those in favor? Opposed, if any. Item 1. Councillor Adams, and then Councillor Elger.
I've moved an amended item 1, but I wondered if our staff could discuss how they propose to deal with the removal of holding provisions and the revised process. There was a question that I asked our staff earlier about how many of these have come through council over the last few years and how many of those have been in any way of, I'll call it, special public interest that would have warranted extra discussion. I wonder if our staff could address those questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd love to address the questions, and I have actually a very brief presentation. I'm just looking for it to kind of pop up here on the, whoop, it's getting close. There we go. It's not helping. There we go. Okay. The first thing I wanted to mention to Council this evening regarding the removal of the holding provisions, the process improvements that we have planned, is we are not varying in any way the establishment of holding zones. So that's the first point I wanted to make. Section 36 of the Planning Act is a unique section. It allows holding zones to be imposed by council. It's a very powerful tool because you can establish the use permissions and the regulations for a particular zone, but it allows council to impose conditions on the removal of that H. And typically it involves things that have to be done on the site being cleaned up, site decommissioning, and potentially entering into servicing agreements. So it kind of controls the timing of development, but it doesn't control the use permissions. So what we're trying to do, and staff are recommending tonight, is changes to the removal of holding provisions. The Planning Act outlines an abbreviated administrative process relating to the removal of H's. As an example, there is no notice of complete application, no statutory public meetings required, no notice of passing. Effectively, it's saying if you are a owner of lands with an H and you have fulfilled the conditions, the obligations, you should remove the H. So rightly so, the only right of appeal is actually by the applicant for the removal of the H, if council, of course, refuses to remove that H. The problem we're having internally is that currently our process internally mirrors a standard planning application. So we're really treating it the same, and we go through a very lengthy reporting mechanism through SIRE and on to council, and we think we can be more efficient. I'm not going to outline what you have in front of you in the report, but what we're trying to do is have a more streamlined and efficient process which better aligns with and clarifies the rights of appeal under the Planning Act. And the approach that we're proposing is actually very consistent with the ones used by other Halton Region municipalities and more closely mirrors, I think, Milton. And in the efforts to look for efficiencies internally, it's a similar process to what we do with part law control exemptions, where a bylaw is placed on council's agenda. And another related example would be delegation of minor permits to heritage planning staff. So our recommendation is in front of you. And to speak to Councillor Adams, some of his questions, I started tracking the holding zone permission request to remove when I started here about 5 years ago, because I was a bit surprised at the process that we were using, because I was very familiar with a more administrative process. And we have had in the order of about 20 plus or minus 20 to 25. So I said kind of about 4 to 6 that we received every year. And it started off 5 years ago that they were on the public meeting part of the agenda. They've kind of slid to the discussion and then to the consent. And I couldn't recall one of those items being debated at council in the time that I've been here. Could have been before my time, but at least in the last 5 years, we haven't had any debates on it. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Oops. The second, so I've had you draft with me a change to the recommendation or an amendment to it. That would be that staff ensure that the ward councillors receive notices of intention to remove a holding provision H affecting properties within their ward as per Appendix A of the report from Planning Services dated November 11, 2015. That was to ensure that if there was something in the ward that a ward councillor thought was going to be of special interest to the public, that they could pursue it in some additional way. In the report, you've got the second step is to provide a memo to the clerk. Is the intention of the memo to provide complete information as to why the application is coming forward?
Yes, it would, but the similar type of information would actually be on the bylaw itself. So in the preambles of the bylaw, you might say, and whereas council endorsed an H that required a site to be decommissioned, and therefore we've received from the Ministry of Environment and through Halton Region notification that the record of site condition was filed, et cetera, et cetera. Now therefore council passes. So all of that information would be there. But the memo is really more similar to what we do with part law control, where our director is basically telling the clerks that those similar conditions have been fulfilled. I suggested, rather than using that time frame, to use the earlier notice, which we had tended to do anyway, as per your suggestion, because it actually goes out sooner. We'd be sending the courtesy notices out probably within 2 weeks of the council meeting, and the memo may be a week or so in front.
Sorry, the memo might be?
It might be closer to the council meeting. It might be only a week from the council meeting.
So you would be sending out public notices to other individuals before the memo to the clerk's department?
Correct.
Oh, I see.
So that would be
Okay.
in my mind, that would be a better way of letting council know that it's coming up on the agenda.
At the earliest opportunity?
Correct.
Okay. And should a council member through this process have a particular concern or a particular question about the removal of an H, they would be able to come to staff to get the full report and the full details behind the materials that were required to lift the H? Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I must say I was a little surprised it was in the consent agenda. I guess when I look at our There, we're on again. Perfect. Like, when I look at our official plan, the holding provision, it does a lot of things to help we councillors out also, to make sure things are done. Like, if you got the official plan, if you read through a few of them, like the satisfies policy of the plan related to heritage conservation, site plan control, potentially contaminated sites, protection of the natural environment, community improvement, and other planning matters determined to be relevant to the development of lands. And you got 4 other conditions also. And I guess maybe I'm just thinking about Ward 4, where right now we've got an application for 17,000 people in 15 hectares, and there could be a little issue with traffic and noise, like all of these things. And for staff to, if we don't have something coming to council, it could slip through. I read your Appendix A of what we're going to get. We're not going to get much information from what I can see on that I would even get a heads up. It'd be a Z number and an address, and that would be it, basically. Now, am I wrong? Are we going to get, am I going to get a full report of anything in Ward 4 that would be removed, or if Roger and I would get that type of information? Or are we just going to get that one-page summary, which is a generic whereas, in the Appendix A that you have attached tonight?
Through your worship to Councillor Elgar, 2 ways of responding to that question. First of all, a lot of the issues that you described are typically submission requirements on an application, and they would be dealt with through the application review process. What I use tonight is the two examples that tend to come up the majority of the time when we issue an H, and that is site decommissioning or servicing. You could use the example, I've seen it in the past, where a heritage easement agreement is required as a condition of removal of H, things like that. As I mentioned to Councillor Adams, what you would get is the notification as a councillor that an H that's in your ward is proposed to be lifted. And as Councillor Adams mentioned, you could then phone staff if you want a little more details on it. You would see the bylaw on the agenda. Inside of that bylaw, as an example we have in the report, you would have all of the preamble of how those conditions have been fulfilled. When council imposed those conditions, what bylaw it was, and then the preambles would clearly identify how the conditions have been fulfilled.
So maybe when I read the Appendix A, I was a little misled then, because I didn't see anything where it was going to say specifically what we put the holding provision on for and what has been done to remove it. It just looked like it was more of a generic boilerplated explanation. But also, when you get into, on the official plan, what you're saying is the holding provision is to adopt measures to mitigate negative impacts resulting from the proximity of lands to transportation, utility corridors, incompatible land uses. It's relatively a general tool that we have our ability to use, and maybe council might not agree with some of the measures that are coming up to adapt to these negative impacts. That's why if we only have, did you say 46 in 5 years?
No, I said in around 25. I actually have a spreadsheet that I was tracking these.
So 25 over 5 years, so we
Yep.
average like 5 a year?
Yep.
So it's not really a big deal in the first place.
Yeah, nothing is stopping, again, through your worship to Councillor Algar, of determining what the hold is in the first place. Council still has the ability of imposing the hold and then outlining the conditions that need to be fulfilled. That particular process is not different. That's not what we're suggesting.
Will it be on the agenda, like it'll be, it won't be a consent item? Like going forward, the report we have tonight in P&D, would it be a specific, it won't be specific to an address or location or anything? It would just be one of the back pages of a bylaw?
Yes, going forward, if you adopt the recommendations, you would obviously get the notice as described. You would know that it's on the agenda because there's a bylaw on the agenda, and as I'm looking at Appendix B now, this is an example bylaw that says, in this case, the two things that were the conditions of the H removal were sufficient water and wastewater capacity from the region and the Ministry of the Environment record of site condition. And then your following whereas clauses of your preamble would describe how those are fulfilled. And we've left room for dates and things in there. So you'd have all that information on your bylaw.
I read that, but it looked very simple, which is good, but there's an awful lot of other things in our official plan that we state we use the H provision for. That's my concern.
And again, nothing is stopping your worship from council to, at the time the zoning is passed, to putting an H on with other types of conditions as per what's listed in the official plan. Nothing is preventing that.
So then if we raise it, then it doesn't get approved, obviously. If council votes not to approve the bylaw itself for that specific property, that's how it will work?
Are you talking about when the H was put in place in the first place, or when you're taking it off?
When staff are recommending that it be taken off.
Again, as I mentioned in my presentation, if the conditions have been fulfilled and council refuses to pass the bylaw, then the applicant has the right of appeal.
Exactly, he's got 120 days according to the Ontario Planning Act that he can then go to the OMB.
I don't think there's any deadline as far as an appeal when it comes to holding provisions.
There is. It's on section 36 sub 3, appeals to the OMB under the holding provision of 36.1, actually, is what it states in here. I guess I don't have any other questions. I think I'm not in support of it going forward. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Algar, I just wanted to add to what Mr. Hanna has said. The holding zone, when you place it on, when you're reviewing a specific application, you decide as council what are the appropriate hold provisions that need to be put in place. And then those are put into the bylaw. So at the time when you look at an application, if you feel there's too much ambiguity in the holding provision, then you have the opportunity not to approve that bylaw in that form when you originally have it. So you know what you're approving, which will come later with a bylaw in an agenda with just the bylaw at the back of it. So I think that's your first opportunity to turn your mind to that. The reason that the official plan is so generic is because it gives you the ability to look at different types of triggers when you actually look at the application. And I would use the similarity to the holding zone provisions as almost a condition at site plan. Because when you approve a site plan, you approve it subject to conditions, and then those conditions are cleared by staff, and they're specific. You know what they are when you dealt with the application, and you then leave it to staff to clear them. The holding zone is not that much different, but because it's approved by bylaw, it actually comes in front of council for approval. And so what this is trying to do is really put the holding zone into a similar kind of process as you would clearing your site plan conditions, but it gives you the opportunity to see as a bylaw on your agenda, if that assists with some of your questions.
I thank you for that. It's just that, to me, the holding provision is a much bigger issue than an individual site plan where you've got a house or a location. Like this could be hundreds of acres with a holding provision, which it's big. It can be big. I'd not say it has to be, but in many cases it seems to be. And especially with the applications coming in lately. I thank you.
Commissioner?
I was just going to add that in most cases, how we apply it is for a record site condition, which is, I think, one of the examples here. So you can narrow down those options of how unique it is, or you can expand it out when you deal with the application. So that is fully in control of council.
Thank you.
Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Hanna. I'm going back a long piece, and I'm going to ask if you can find some information for me. Many years ago, when the 7-Eleven store was built in Bronte, it was done after we removed an H on that particular site, and in doing so, we ended up finding, no, that's not the right word, we ended up getting a few perks or a little better situation than was originally discussed. If I'm explaining it right, I think you know what I'm talking about, but I can't remember what it was that we got. Is there any way of finding out what we were able to achieve?
Through your worship to Councillor Robinson, unfortunately, I think what's being described was before my time, so I'm looking for some help. I'm sorry.
There was a holding provision. There was a big deal. We talked about it a lot, and we agreed to remove the H because. And I can't remember what the becauses were. Would have been interesting.
Well, thank you for that.
But it's no help. I'd like to know what it was.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Madam Commissioner, if there are no other questions, I have a couple. Could you speak a little more, put some flesh on the bones of your remark that if council weren't happy with a proposed holding provision, it could tighten it or vary it or improve it or change it? Can you give us a little more information about that?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, when you're looking at the application, there's a recommendation there to approve the application subject to the bylaw. And the bylaw and the staff report actually explains the holding provisions that you're putting in the bylaw. If you're not happy with those holding provisions, then you could refer the application back to staff for more details on that particular item or that issue that's being recommended by staff to be as a holding zone, so that then you can be satisfied with the appropriateness of that H.
So council could refer it back for a tighter or more detailed or broader or whatever approach to the holding provision? Is that what I'm to understand?
That's correct, and that would be at the time of the zoning bylaw, when you're actually looking at the bylaw when it is put in place, not when you're looking at the holding zone removal.
And are the holding provisions appealable?
Yes, the bylaw is appealable. So the zoning bylaw that you originally approved with the H on it is fully appealable by anyone.
All right. So council, my take on this, for what it's worth, is that the far more valuable and important thing that we learned here tonight is that we have a an ability that I don't think we knew of before, which is to request changes to holding provisions to make them tougher or whatever the right word is. And given the nature of planning and how you got to be really specific, or, you know, we worry all the time about loopholes and meaning of words and so on. The front end of the process is probably far more important than the removal end, because the applicant, or whatever the right word is, can appeal a refusal to lift it. So where we really need to put our energy is at the front end to make sure that they really have to meet what we meant, right? And that's a rhetorical question. So, as a result of this discovery and the fact that I think the holding tool, we might be able to make more out of it than we've been able to make in the past. I think it's important for us to remember on a go-forward basis that the front end's more important than the lifting end. But nevertheless, this is a council that really prizes public notice and notice to council, and the ability to consider things on a timely basis. And I'm concerned that this proposal reduces rather than increases council's oversight to the tail end of the process. And although I take it, I hear the advice from staff that that's the wrong time, and that the best time is at the front end. I still think, given that you know, our brand is controlling growth, that instead of agreeing to this, I think we should vote it down. The existing procedure, there's no evidence that it encumbers anybody, and it's only 5 times a year. So since there's no visible benefit to anybody from doing it, and only questions about where we are left as council to know in time to do things, I think I will be voting against it, and I'm recommending we turn it down. Shall I put the vote? Councillor Adams?
So I moved it to get it onto the agenda. I had a discussion with Councillor Elgar beforehand. In the discussion around the number of reports that are being generated, it's a tiny number. I fully agree the importance of this whole matter is at the front end, not the back end. This is, I'm not really sure in the discussion and the staff report what the true efficiency is. I understand there's a staff report that gets generated, but apart from a staff report, it's not really clear as to who the benefactor is on the whole matter. Is it just a matter of not writing 4 staff reports a year or 5 staff reports a year? Is that what we're talking about?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Adams, I'm not sure what I have to say is going to change anybody's minds, but there's clearly a benefit on the staff level from an efficiency point of view. There's a tremendous amount of time that's spent putting through reports. You may say it's 5 reports a year, but it's certainly 5 other hours or countless hours that could be devoted to something else. There's a bit of a confusion I have from time to time with notice going out to residents about their appeal rights at the time the holding is lifted. So that would be a benefit to this. And again, I'm trying to look at it from a council's perspective. I think when we wrote this report at a staff level, we thought that there would be efficiencies for council as well, not to worry about the stuff at the back end so much. Focus, again, is what councillor or what the mayor said, focus on the front end, and put it on the agenda as a bylaw.
Is there any change to the public notice that happens?
Currently, we are doing a courtesy notice, and we call it a public meeting notice, 120 meters around the site. This particular recommendation in front of you would notify the person affected by the H and the immediately abutting owners. So we're cutting down the notice as well.
Oh, well then, I agree, and despite having moved it, I'll withdraw the motion to move it. And instead, I will move that the process be maintained.
Any discussion? I'm satisfied with the procedural twist that you've offered, and I accept it as a new motion. I'll put the vote if there's no other speakers. All those in favor? Opposed? And the councillor's motion carries and the proposal is rejected. There are no public hearing items tonight, and we do have a discussion item, and we have a delegation on it. And I'd like to welcome David Johnston to the podium to share his information on the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District matter. Welcome, Mr. Johnstone. Council is looking forward to your information.
Thank you very much. I thought maybe Scott was going to make another presentation. Pardon my voice tonight. I'm fighting a cold and it's affecting my voice. However, I will read this through and hope to get to the end of it. Your Worship and members of Council, my name is David Johnstone, and my wife and I are the longest-term residents in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District. Since March, I've been the most actively involved resident throughout the Heritage Conservation District review process. I have participated in the focus group sessions held by town planning staff, attended the public meeting held on June 16th, submitted written comments and suggestions to staff on 3 occasions, as well as speaking before this committee on October 7th and the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee on November 17th. I also attended a meeting of neighborhood residents ordered by a small group of dissident property owners. As a result of this considerable involvement, I feel that I am also speaking for the silent majority of residents in the district. With the exception of property categorization, the draft plan basically confirms and expands upon, in writing, the guidelines and criteria of the Heritage Oakville Committee has been using for the past many years. Most importantly, the draft plan and guidelines being considered this evening provide substantially more detail and clarification than has been available previously. This should assist residents, Heritage Planning staff, Heritage Oakville Committee members, the Planning and Development Committee, and Town Council in interpretation of the new district plan. However, the 2 major concerns of residents in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District continue to be the demolition of older homes and the scale and massing of new development in this district. I'd like to first address the demolition of older homes. As I mentioned in my presentation to you on October 7th, none of the houses built during the past 85 years will be protected. 5 of the 6 homes on the west side of 1st Street from Lakeshore Road south to Union Street have now been deemed non-contributing. In today's real estate environment, it is likely that all of these smaller homes will be demolished when the current owners sell. Demolition of this magnitude in a concentrated area on one street cannot help but have a potential major impact on the heritage character of 1st Street and the district in total when new development proposals are submitted. I am very disappointed that none of the previously designated Category 2 properties on the west side of 1st Street will be protected from demolition under the new property categorization system. However, although only 27 properties in the Heritage District have been designated as contributing under the new plan, it is important to recognize that, that these residences, which cannot be demolished, represent 16 more buildings which will be protected from demolition compared to the current Heritage Conservation District plan. And I think this is most important. I'd like to move on to scale and massing of new development. With the potential to develop a substantial number of older homes, it becomes even more important that the zoning bylaw pertaining to new development in this Heritage District is appropriate to address the scale and massing concerns of many residents in order to retain the unique character of the area. Zoning bylaw 2014-014 is the only means available to control the scale and massing of new development anywhere. In my opinion, the report does not adequately address scale and massing for new development. The draft plan does refer to the zoning bylaw 2014-014 in regards to height and spaces around properties. However, the guidelines for scale and massing are relatively general. No reference is made to Special Provision 12 in the draft plan. I'd like to address Special Provision 12. This provision is the primary document which will control scale and massing. In 1984, the town implemented a special provisions bylaw for the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District to control massing and retain open space in this heritage area. Special Provision 12 has been included in the new 2014 zoning bylaw, with the exception of the provision for a maximum floor area to lot ratio, which has been removed. Zoning bylaw 2014-014 allows unlimited maximum floor area to lot ratio. Consequently, maximum lot coverage and building height remain the only bylaw provisions available to control the massing of a residence on a lot. Removal of the maximum floor area to lot ratio, in my opinion, encourages the building of two-story box-like houses and allows for greater massing on a property. The staff report you have received tonight contains a resolution recommending that the Heritage District in total be reviewed to consider reintroduction of a maximum floor area to lot ratio in Special Provision 12. I strongly support this recommendation, as I believe successful implementation will provide greater control over the scale and massing of new construction, and very importantly, will allow for more creative design. Consideration of new development proposals that will come in the future. Approval of the draft plan and guidelines, along with the suggested revisions to Special Provision 12, will provide specific criteria and directions of intent to town planning staff, the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee, the Committee of Adjustment, and Town Council when requests are received for building demolition and new construction in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District. If scale and massing of new development are to be adequately controlled, it is critical that the provisions contained in Bylaw 2014-014 with Special Provision 12 be strictly adhered to when considering variance requests for new development. When variance requests are received, it is very important that due diligence be exercised by town staff and appropriate committees. Development proposals should be discouraged or denied, which have substantial variances that will negatively affect the rhythm, alignment, spacing, setbacks, massing, and orientation of buildings in the streetscape, as outlined in Section 4.3.3.2.1 of the proposed district plan and guidelines. I recognize that the Committee of Adjustment is a provincial body whose decisions cannot be overridden by council. However, in cases where significant bylaw variances have been approved by the Committee of Adjustment, which negatively impact the historical attributes of this heritage district, I sincerely hope that Town Council will support an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District is the smallest residential conservation district in the town of Oakville, comprised of only 66 properties. The district is in a period of serious transition. Within the past 2 years, 4 demolition permits have been issued with the imminent probability of more to come. Developers and new buyers want our building lots and location near downtown, but not our houses. Every effort must be taken by residents and the town to retain the unique heritage character of this conservation district. Your approval of the recommendations in the staff report and serious consideration of my scale and massing concerns will assist in achieving this objective. Thank you for your time this evening, and I'd be prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for coming and adding your information to this file. Are there questions? Councillor Elgar.
So what I heard, you've read through this, you've gone through it in detail, and you think this is a fantastic report, and everything should be
I don't say
approved.
it's fantastic.
Well, it's good enough.
What I really say is that, having been in all these meetings and listened to people and asked questions of them, I really think that this is the best compromise that will be achieved by virtue of the long process we've gone through. It's an excellent process. We've heard from all dissidents and others, and I think the town staff has done a very good job in trying to accommodate as much as they can from the various parties. And I don't think if were to be done again, you would end up with anything better. At this point in time, perhaps in 5 years, or whenever the plan is going to be reviewed again, we can add more additional properties to the contributing category. But at this point in time, I think the report should be accepted and approved by you.
Well, thank you for coming and speaking tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for your customary clarity, Mr. Johnston. We have another delegation, Mr. Lytle. Or Little? Lytle. Third time lucky.
Yeah, there we go.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. My pleasure to be here tonight. Following on from David Johnstone's presentation, mine is along the same lines. My name's John Lytle. I live at number 30 2nd Street. I've lived on 2nd Street since 1987. I'm here to support the resolutions relating to the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District Plan and to urge a review of the zoning district as recommended in the staff report. With David Johnstone, I was a member of the Lakeside Residents Association committee when the original Heritage Plan was adopted in the early 1990s. I believe that over the last 20 plus years, the current plan has been well accepted not only by the original property owners, such as myself, but even more importantly by those who've subsequently moved into the district. On 2nd Street alone, 2 new houses have been built, 11 houses have undergone major renovations during that period of time. And most importantly of all, the basic streetscape of 25 years ago has been maintained. Anybody driving down there today would see still a beautiful street that is really relatively unchanged from what it was when we went into the Heritage District. The entire Heritage District concept has put an onus on everyone involved, the residents, architects, potential purchasers, Town Heritage Committee, town planners, etc. It's required a buy-in by each group, and I believe in general that this has been achieved. Looking at the proposed revision, I fully support the proposal and believe that the vast majority of residents are in agreement with the new plan. The main reason for the new for saying that, and David just alluded to that, is the process that the town staff have been through with us in terms of drawing up the document that you see here tonight. The original document was not the document you see tonight. There has been numerous meetings, focus groups, etc., etc. We've all been involved in that consultative process, and the town staff, I believe, should be congratulated on the way in which they addressed the whole situation. I don't think there's anybody in the district that can't say they weren't kept informed through the whole process. So it's been a real result of different and very different, in some cases, views, but it's come together, and I think it's been a successful document in that respect. So I urge adoption of the proposed plan. I also support the staff recommendation that there's need to review the zoning of the district because of the big box problem that we potentially face, and I think that could really make a difference going forward if we change this maximum lot coverage to the, or maximum floor area to lot ratio provision. Without that control, I think that there could be a real problem going forward, and also David's comments about the Committee of Adjustment, I would concur with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming to show support for not only the result, but the words of praise for the process. It will inspire more behavior like that.
We hope so.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this item? Seeing none, is there Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd be very pleased to move this, and also to take this opportunity to congratulate our heritage staff who've, you know, as you've heard from the residents who've been consulted, it is an extremely extensive process to go through, and it's one that's been long on our books, and I don't think any of us were looking forward to doing it knowing it was going to open up all kinds of things that were badly needed to be addressed. But as I say, the fact that we've come to this point where people are appreciating the fact they've been consulted, and we've reached a very, very good state of compromise, as Mr. Johnson had indicated. I think it's excellent. Bravo to staff.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. Councillor Giddings.
I share the concerns for Mr. Johnson and Mr. Lytle regarding recommendation number 3. The one in surety that seems to be there is the 2014-014. Do we have a time? It says that we're going to undertake a review. I think it would bring clarity and a sense of comfort for those in the district to know what time frame we're looking at. Obviously, sooner rather than later would be much better because there is a concern over possible development in the district. Do we have any sense of timing on this, how quickly we could have it done?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Giddings, my understanding is we'd move on this very quickly. We'd have somebody assigned to it, and we'd get it done as soon as possible.
Can we, just a little further clarification in terms of as soon as possible?
Would that be January?
I guess December is out.
Later this month?
We're not trying to nail you down to an exact date, but we're trying to nail you down to an exact date.
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, we'll be looking at it in completion in the first quarter of 2016.
That would be great. It is, there is some angst about this, and so that would be very much appreciated. Thanks.
All right. Any others? Shall I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Council, I now need your attention on the advisory committee minutes. Councillor Duddick? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Now, Council, I have an item of new business before we rise and report to Council with your consent. I'd like to do this, and here we go. I need a mover to go into a session closed to the public for the purpose of discussing a subject matter regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality. Can I have Councillor Lapworth? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Madam Clerk, could you, to the public, I can tell you that there's no other items on the agenda. We've completed the meeting except for this little matter. I've arranged it so that you don't have to stay late. Madam Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor. My apologies for standing up and interrupting your next session of business, but I did want to indicate to Council that this is the last day of Scott Hanna at a council meeting. He's retiring. He's already left. There he is. Boy, he's fast. He is retiring on December the 18th. He'll be leaving the town, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention this evening.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Right. I call the meeting to order. Council has met in a session closed to the public under the provisions of the Municipal Act to discuss a subject matter regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality, and given direction to staff. I now would like a motion to rise and report. Councillor Knoll, all those in favor? That's carried. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1 and 2, confidential consent items C1 and C2, discussion item 3, and advisory committee minutes item 4, as noted by the clerk, and an additional confidential item introduced at the meeting. I need a mover and seconder for the report. Councillor Elgar, Councillor Giddings, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. Is there any other item that anyone would like to bring up under emergency congratulations or condolence? Thank you. Then a mover and seconder for the bylaws would be in order at this time. Councillor Robinson, thank you. Councillor Knoll, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. That completes our work and our agenda tonight. I really thank you for the time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.